Okay, well, welcome and thank you all so much for joining us for the first Performing Arts section meet and greet of 2026. I just have a couple of housekeeping announcements before I introduce our guest today. So first, as is our typical Zoom etiquette, we ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentation to avoid any unintended interruptions or distractions. There will be time at the end for question and answer. So during that time, you are encouraged to unmute and ask questions directly, or you are also welcome to write questions and comments in the chat, including during the presentation, and we'll read those out during the question and answer time. The presentation and the Q&A are being recorded, and that recording will be available on our YouTube page in a few weeks. Finally, we encourage you to keep an eye out for announcements on our upcoming meet and greets, including our next, which is scheduled for the first week of February. So information on that will be coming out very soon. So today I am very excited to welcome Louie Fleck, Senior Archives Manager at the Brooklyn Academy of Music Hamm Archives, where he has worked since 2009. His background includes many careers, including designer, recording engineer, producer, photographer, composer, and archivist. So Louie, I will now hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Um, I'm Louis. I created a little presentation which I will share with, and I welcome questions. I am not a archivist by training. I sort of fell into it, but since then have done quite a bit of work on it. And anyway, let me get started over here. Let me get this presentation up. And okay, okay. I was hoping they'd be filling the screen. Is it filling the screen? I don't think it is.
No, not yet.
There we go. Yes? Okay. So, the Brooklyn Academy of Music is the longest continually running performing arts institution in the United States, or at least that's what we say we are. We opened in 1861 with a building on Montague Street. And at that time, there were several other academies of music in the United States. There was one in New York, which was Manhattan at that time on 14th Street. There was one in Philadelphia. There was one in Boston and Baltimore. And the basic idea of the Academy of Music for the Brooklyn Academy of Music was that there were the elite of Brooklyn, and Brooklyn was the fifth largest city in the country at the time, and they wanted to have a place of their own. And these academies of music would typically have three basic components. They would have a state-of-the-art performing venue, which looks like an opera house. They would have a ballroom, which we would now think of as a configurable performance space. And then they would have some kind of community aspect. And at that time, that looked like what we would think of today as continuing education. And the first building opened on Montague Street, which is in the part of Brooklyn that is closest to downtown Manhattan. So that was kind of like the place for the elite. And they were interested in just presenting high art, if you will, in terms of performance, which at that time meant opera and classical music. But within a year, Shakespeare was added to the programming. But not only did the Brooklyn Academy present shows and lectures and special events, there were also rentals, which included everything from balls, from private or social dances, to shows like uh, things resembling circus shows or any basically anything that wasn't X-rated would be allowed in if it was a rental. And this is the original building on Montague Street. There are very, very few photographs of it, but here's one from a stereo viewer card. And in 1903, the building burned down, which is typically what happens to most theaters in history. And at that point in 1903, the Academy had been relatively successful, and it was the land had become so highly valued that they decided to sell the property and build a new Academy of Music, and that's what there's. These are some pictures from the fire. The fire. When we were working on a 150th anniversary film, the director found some of this footage. This is the only footage of the original Academy, and it was in the Smithsonian, and we got it for this film. It's like 1 minute of footage. Anyway, the new building, which is the main building of the Brooklyn Academy of Music, is basically in the part of Brooklyn where Atlantic Avenue and Flatbush Avenue meet, and that's like the transportation center of Brooklyn. So this was really a logical place to rebuild the Academy. And on top of that, this building was much larger than the original building. The original building had a opera house and a ballroom, but they were the same room, and it would be converted back and forth depending on what was being presented. The new building had not only an opera house and a ballroom, but it also had a second large theater, a 1,400 seat theater that was called the Music Hall, and it would be used for music, but also for speeches and large lectures. That was about 1,400 seats, and the original Opera House was about 2,200 seats. Um, and there's another set of views of the original of the new building. Um, and here it is, more or less what it looks like today. um, Now, the Academy has expanded, and in fact, um, the Brooklyn Academy of Music is the only Academy of Music that is left, and I think we can attribute that success to its ability to change and adapt, whereas other academies of music were probably more like local performing arts venues. The Brooklyn Academy of Music has an interesting history where basically it was like almost a death's door, and then it was based the people that were running the institution gave it one more chance and hired this guy named Harvey Lichtenstein, who was very experimental. He was desperate, actually, and he was able to. He really tried a lot of different types of programming that eventually led to the Academy of Music becoming recognized as an international performing arts institution. And the most notable programming that we've done, or the thing that is most well known in the world, is the Next Wave Festival, which began as a series in 1981. You can see with Philip Glass and Trisha Brown and Lucinda Childs and others, where they were just experimenting with this idea of presenting they don't like calling it avant-garde, but let's say challenging work. And then it all worked out pretty well. And in 1983, it became codified into the Next Wave Festival, which is basically our fall season from like the beginning of October until the middle of December. And one of the things Harvey was able to do is convince well-known artists to contribute poster designs, which would be used to promote the Next Wave Festival, but also were sold to help raise money. Um, in the first in the Next Wave series, one of the groundbreaking or most important presentations was Laurie Anderson's United States Parts 1 through 4, which was I think like an 8 hour presentation over 2 days, and the album. She put out an album of it recorded at the Academy, and it's kind of a big deal in the performance art world. Another important show in the first Next Wave Festival was Gospel of Colonus. It's one of basically three shows that I know about that have moved to Broadway from the Academy. The other was Patrick Stewart Macbeth in 2009, and the Lorraine Hansberry play a couple of years ago. Um, and probably one of the things that BAM is most famous for is presenting the revival of Einstein on the Beach, which is the Philip Glass, Robert Wilson, Lucinda Childs, shall we say, reinvention of opera, which was groundbreaking and fascinating on a variety of levels. Um, Another important thing that BAM can take credit for is the Dance Africa Festival, which is this year will be the 39th year in a row of of it's basically our Memorial Day weekend festival, and it started in '77. It's become an incredibly large event, including multiple performances in the Opera House, but also a big street bazaar, a film festival, a bunch of classes, and it's a pretty big deal here in Brooklyn. There's some more recent posters from Dance Africa. Um, in addition, BAM acquired the Majestic Theater, the Brooklyn Majestic Theater, in 1987 in order to present Peter Brook's Mahabharata. And this was part of the Next Wave Festival. It was a 9 hour long production that is considered by many to be legendary. And it involved the Brooklyn Academy. Basically, Peter Brook did not want to perform it in any of the venues that we had, and he instructed Harvey to go find a venue that was like his Bouffe du Nord in Paris. And so there we have a mythology that Harvey broke into this abandoned theater, the Brooklyn Majestic, and then was able to get money out of the city of New York to renovate it, and then the Mahabharata was presented there within a year of acquiring it. This is the inside of the what was then the Brooklyn Majestic, and then became the BAM Majestic, and now is known as the BAM Harvey, which was named after him when he retired. That's the view from the audience. In fact, this is what it looked like in 1987 when it opened. You can see the seats were benches. Even though it was about a $4.5 million renovation, it still was not. It wasn't. It didn't turn this into a luxury theater. It was pretty bare bones, and that's the way that Peter Brook wanted it at the time. And it's considered by many to be one of the best theaters in New York to perform in, at least by performers. Um, so let's go on to the archives. So, like most archive stories, the Academy of Music Archives begins with a bunch of boxes sitting in a corner. And in this case, they were sitting next door to the Opera House in the Williamsburg Bank building, which was, the tallest building in Brooklyn for quite a while, and home to most of the dentists in Brooklyn. Anyway, it was recognized that the archives was valuable. It was first done in a kind of ad hoc basis. A marketing person just started collecting things and looking for things in our history, and that eventually has evolved into a real archive. One of the things I thought might be interesting to talk about is this is the space that we were in from 2014 to 2024. We were basically all of our stuff was sitting on racks, on rolling carts, and it was an old Studebaker factory, and it had every problem you can possibly imagine, from too hot in the summer to too cold in the winter, with water leaks and everything you can imagine. And then we are now in this space, which is across the street from the Opera House. It's called L10, and it was the president of the Academy at the time, Karen Brooks Hopkins, basically negotiated with the city of New York and with the developer to create 4 floors of spaces for the arts. And so those four floors are 651 Arts, which is actually an organization that was started at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. The Brooklyn Public Library has a room dedicated to the arts. The BAM KBH is us, which includes the archives and four new movie theaters, and Mokata, which is a gallery dedicated to the contemporary diaspora. And we are, so this is when we were preparing to move, I was told that we were going to move a year before we actually did. And so I was told, get ready to move and make sure you have everything ready to go. And I got everything ready to go. And then we were put on hold. So we basically, at the time, we had like the carts were not only full, but we also had stuff on top of the carts, and they would not roll out of the doorways if I left the stuff on top of the carts. So we were, long into the process of culling and bringing the collection down to be as small as it could be, and then organizing it. This is right before the move where we wrapped everything in plastic for the trucks to take away. And you can see some of the packing. I'm happy to talk about it if you're interested. I've moved the archives 3 times already. So if you've ever moved an archive, you know that's one of the most dangerous times to be, that's, one of the worst potential time for an archive. Now, this is the new space. And since we had so much time to prepare, we were able to plot out where everything would go ahead of time. And I went back and forth between the new space and the old space, checking the heights of shelves and, figuring out where, what would be the best organization, rather than dropping everything on the floor when we arrived, which there wasn't really enough room for. We were actually able to direct the movers to put the boxes on basically the shelves that they are on today. We also had we have a great space for tubes, which we use for floor plans mostly, and then flat files for posters. And the new archives also includes a reading room. That's the reading room, and right over here on the right side, you can see the Opera House. There's the Opera House. So it's a pretty spectacular room. We're still figuring out what we're going to do with it. Now, this is the filled space with lots of boxes and tubes. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about is the our database. So we use collective access. I imagine lots of people on this call also use collective access. It's a for those who don't, it's a Unix-based open source relational database developed by a group called Whirligig, and this is our front end. I was worried, if I had any problems with the internet. I'm happy to work within the database, but just to quickly show you, we have like a front end, which includes these featured collections that we can curate and take away. You can search through uh, this is all on the front end. You could search through for productions and events through browsing through decades, which you can even then dig in and browse into a specific year or a venue. We obviously, you see, we have lots of venues, and whether it's main stage programming, other programming, or based on series like Dance Africa or Next Wave. And then they will link to the event page for each of these events. This is like what 19 this is what 1984 Next Wave looks like over here. You can also search by object. And so we have thousands and thousands of objects. I can find the number if you're interested. But basically, so Einstein on the Beach is a very well-known, important piece. And you can see photographs, posters, programs. There's video and even pictures of the original score. And you can do searching not only by event or by person, but you can do by type. So, for example, when I'm looking for some video to throw up for some promotional purpose, I can just search through video, and that's very easy. Um, then there's also entities. So you can browse through entities in a similar way by decade. I don't think you can browse by year in this one, or by event series. So if you're like trying to figure out all the people that were involved in Dance Africa or locate somebody who participated in Dance Africa, you can browse and filter to that type. This is an example of a feature collection, um, and I can talk about that more if people are interested. Then we have archival collections. So we've set up the front end so that people not only they don't have to search by event or entity or object. They can also search by types of objects, like programs and playbills are very popular because people can just browse through them. Same with posters, building photographs, and even Harvey's President Records, which is searchable within that collection. Um, and um, yeah, these are some of the featured collections. The featured collections allow us to combine types, so we can have events, objects, and entities on the same page. Otherwise, if you're searching, you can only have one type of thing on a result. Um, and this is one of the features that we got added was a timeline. So we did a timeline for a couple of our big series, Education at BAM, Dance Africa, and one or two others. Um, and basically, these are other subjects I can talk about, or things that we have using collective access. There are all these different search options that are available. Um, we use sets as the way to make feature collections, but it's also a great way to take search results and generate either a collection of objects or a spreadsheet that could be exported as an Excel sheet or a PDF. Um, Displays allow us to view search results based on what we're looking for. So if we're looking for the date of the show and who is in it, we can set up a display that allows you to see just those features that you're looking for. Um, we do batch uploading and processing, typically uploading hundreds of photographs a day for any given show, and then processing it and connecting it to the events and the entities, and other things. The QR coding is interesting. We were able to add a feature to the database where we were able to put QR codes on our boxes. So we were able to catalog them by box, and then the QR code would allow us to easily, we could go into the stacks with an iPad and edit the contents of the box if we need to make a correction. But more importantly, it helps us to find objects very easily. We have a couple of collections that are closed, that are not public. We have a library of, I would say, several thousand books. We also were made responsible for the BAM art collection. BAM art was a way that BAM did a lot of fundraising, and then a couple of years ago, the program was basically shut down. So we inherited that, and then I have a little collection I started about the Majestic before BAM took it over, and well, basically that's more or less what I have for you. Oh, there's sets. This is there examples of sets. So here are, uh, for example, this is a set of photographs by Tom Caravaglia, who was a photographer at BAM, of Charles Ludlam that he took, not at BAM, but I'm a big fan of Charles Ludlam, so I figured I would get that set available. Tom Caravaglia, when he died, his family contributed the photographs and the rights to them to BAM. So these are potentially useful for as income for BAM. Some of the photographs that have been contributed to BAM have already produced income for BAM. There you can see how the sets are organized. Um, and that's basically it. I'm happy to answer questions or talk about um, any specific uh, uh, subject you like, or show you the database in depth if you prefer. I'm just going to mute because I got a cough.
So if anyone has questions, feel free to unmute, feel free to put them in the chat to give people time to think and get started. Louis, I would ask if you're able to talk a little bit more about the move or anything about in terms of did you get to design the space when you moved to the space? How much input did you have in that? Obviously, anything surrounding that, we would love to hear more about that.
Sure. So the move was in the works from the day I started working here in 2009. The problem was is that nobody knew where we were going to move. So originally we were in what is originally the collection was in that Williamsburg Bank building before I started here. But when I started here, it was in a temporary space that was a former Salvation Army citadel, and um, and it had a marching band rehearsing in it. And so we would come in there and there'd be a marching band rehearsing. But then on top of that, the building was falling apart. And so, like, we would have to jump over like puddles of water to get to the stairway to get upstairs. And all the stuff was sitting on those wire rolling carts. So, and the reason it was there was that BAM had acquired this building and was about to renovate it. And then once the renovation began, we had to move. So they had made a deal and moved us over to uh, what's called Metrotech, which is a part of downtown Brooklyn where there's a bunch of skyscrapers. And a former board chair was like ran Metrotech. So he gave us a good deal to as a temporary space in one of these office buildings. And well, right in the middle of while we were there, we were evicted. And so we had to find because he all of a sudden the property values went up and he needed to rent them out. So we had to find a place to move very quickly. And we moved into this old Studebaker factory on Dean Street in Crown Heights. And so basically it was just one L-shaped loft that was, I don't know, maybe 3,000 square feet. And so we rolled all the carts in there and called it a day, and then spent the next few months organizing it, trying to figure out how where there would be desks and how how we could do the work. And everything was on the carts, and we were supposed to be there for a year, and we were there for 10 years. And so and then every winter I would be screaming at them about the heat, and every summer I'd be screaming at them about the air. It was absolutely predictable. In fact, the building changed ownership 3 times while we were there. So every time they would say, "Oh yeah, we're going to fix that. We're going to fix it." And then, I think right about the end they got it pretty together. So whoever's there now has heat in the winter. But so then in this process, the former president of BAM, Karen Brooks Hopkins, was a real deal maker, and she was like trying to figure out how to find a home for the archives, but also her passion was the movies at BAM because the movies, up until the pandemic, were one of the biggest forms of income at the BAM and subsidized a lot of our not-for-profit presentations. So, so she was like, wheeling and dealing and got this deal with I don't know how many of you people are familiar with Brooklyn, but there's this enormous white building across the street from the Opera House where there's an Apple store and a Whole Foods and a bunch of apartments. And that's the building that we're in, this modern building. And so she was able to like make a deal with the city where they would get the air rights and um and the we would get the space and and the city would bless it or give them those air rights and other um, incentives for the construction and then I was my boss put me in touch with the designer of the space. So there was somebody hired by the space, and it was really complicated because there were all these hoops that had to be jumped through because it was the city, it was the developer, and it was BAM. And not only that, there were four arts organizations in this four-story space. So there had to be like negotiations between the different arts organizations, the developer, and the city, and things went back and forth numerous times. Um, and at one point before the pandemic, I was asked to evaluate what we had in order to figure out how much compact shelving, flat files, and tube storage we would need, as well as, our intention, which was to shoot and scan, which we do like a tremendous amount of, as well as office space. So I was measuring and providing these numbers to this designer and exaggerating excessively in order to have space to grow. And then at the same time, we were culling for the whole 10 years we were in the Dean Street location. We were culling the collection as much as we could. We combined several collections together. They actually made more sense after we combined them. We eliminated as much duplication as possible. We consulted with different departments to find out if they really needed what we had in our retention guide. We had a consultant do our retention guide, and then we realized the consultant didn't really know what they were doing. So we just started negotiating directly with our different departments and figuring that out. And that allowed us to eliminate a lot of stuff as well. We also had stuff in deep storage that we were like, when the pandemic hit, it was like, everything was about how can we save money? How can we cut costs? So we needed to eliminate our deep storage as well, offsite storage. And so we eliminated most of that as well. The parts that the archive is responsible for. Of course, our finance department has its own separate, legally required storage, and as well as HR. We don't deal with HR files, of course. And anyway, so I was, yeah, as I said before, I was told, okay, we're moving, get ready to move in a couple of weeks, and then we were delayed by a year. So, but what that actually allowed me to do was, first of all, get rid of all the furniture. The furniture we had was selected for us by a BAM uh, like guy that decided what desks we should have. It. We were so pissed off when they arrived because they were like big, like fake wood office desks, and we all hated them passionately. We wanted what we wanted. We were happy to work on folding tables, to be honest. And what we did was as soon as possible, I started like putting the stuff we wanted to get rid of on Craigslist and getting rid of tables, chairs, desks, flat files that were damaged, and even the rolling carts. I was able to get rid of some of them. Um, and then once I got rid of all this furniture, I was able to. Oh, we had a lot of shelving that was really nice shelving, but there was no place for it here. So once I was able to get rid of all that furniture, I was able to put the carts in such a way that I had an aisle everywhere I needed it. So I was still able to work. I was able to access every single file. In fact, easier than I was when we had furniture, because very often we'd have carts like bunched up against each other. We had to move them out of the way to get something or to try to get to something. And the culling also helped because we really knew where everything was now. Before we really didn't know, and very often like I said, I combined three collections. In the past, we might have to go through those three collections to find something that was being requested. So the process got actually made us more efficient. And then, like I said, we physically moved this. When the actual date came, we were so well prepared that the actual move took a day and a half.
Thank you so much. That seems like a lot. If anyone has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I'll give everyone a second without me talking if anyone has a question.
I see Mark is Mark from is this Mark who wrote the book about the Wizard of Oz? He's not, maybe he's not here. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Hey Mark, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, so the very first show in the Majestic was The Wizard of Oz in 1904, which was a transfer from Broadway.
Right.
And Mark wrote a amazing book about the pre Judy Garland Wizard of Oz, which everybody should get a copy of.
I have a couple of questions. It's Natasha Simon. Um, Two questions. The first is, you mentioned at some point in your recall, you were saying, so I went to my boss and my boss said blah blah blah. In the hierarchy, who do you report to in the hierarchy of BAM? That's number one. And number two, do you have an oral history component to the archive?
Okay, so I was hired by a friend whose name is Sharon Lehner. Some of you may know her, and she's the director of the archives. However, since the pandemic, she has mostly been off site and, in fact, is now currently living in Egypt. So she comes in every so often for a while, and we obviously communicate, but my job as manager has expanded considerably. Um, and then, as far as an oral history, yes, we do have several oral histories. One thing we did was before Harvey died, we did a in-depth interview of Harvey. It's about 13 or 14 hours, interviewed by John Rockwell, who was the critic in the New York Times. The New York Times. He was very lucid, and he was, it's real. It's very informative. We had it at the time transcribed, which at the time was very expensive. Now it's very cheap to do a transcription. We did 1 hour on video, so that's really nice. But now we have done other oral histories since then. Our artistic director, Joe Malillo, retired in 2018, and he wanted us to do an oral history in a very specific way. So we did it the way he wanted it done. He wanted artists to interview him. And so we did that. I've done a couple of little self-initiated projects. There was a lighting designer who wanted to do some research at the archives, and then she clearly had lots to talk about. So I wanted to interview her, and I did. I haven't I basically just need budget to get these things transcribed. And but we're very open to oral histories now that it's so cheap to do them.
Mm.
Yeah. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
We have a couple of questions in the chat. So the first one is, what is the best unexpected discovery you've made while working in the collections?
Well, I can tell you one of the most popular discoveries we have is so one of there have been numerous resident companies at BAM over different times. At one point, Harvey really became infatuated with theater and started his own resident theater company, the BAM Theater Company, which practically bankrupted the place. And the precursor to it was a production using basically BAM Theater people, of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which was Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice's musical Before Jesus Christ Superstar. And so it had been produced in England, a minor production in England, I believe, and then it was produced at BAM. It was the American premiere, if you will. And we have a poster, and I knew about it, and people asked about it, and Cleavon Little was in it, and who was Blazing Saddles, for those of you who are old enough to remember. But anyway, so when Karen Brooks Hopkins retired, she called me over to her house and said, I want you to take all these things away. And she had everything. They were like BAM memorabilia, T-shirts, posters, all kinds of awards and crap. And then there was this coat, and it was the coat from Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I said, "How did you get this?" And she said, "Oh, well, when we there's a series at BAM. It's like a community event called Bamboo, and it's a Halloween party on Halloween. And in front of the Opera House, they do like games and costume uh, contest and a band and so on." And she said, "I needed a costume for the first Bamboo." And I knew that Harvey had this coat in his closet. It was in his home. The coat had been given to Harvey when the show was over, and he promptly put it in his coat closet. And she knew it was there, so she went and got it from him, and then she wore it to the first Bamboo, and then she put it in her coat closet, and it sat there until she called me to take it away. So that's pretty fun.
Thank you. Our next question from the chat. Considering the development of the BAM archives, what skills do you think will be most important in the future for professionals interested in performing arts archiving?
Um, okay, so like archiving performing arts is relatively new in the world of archiving. Like music has been archived for years and years, and art, physical art, paintings and sculpture have been archived. But performance is really hard to archive because it's really ephemeral. And even if you have a video of a play or a performance, it's not like the real thing. So there are I think that is like one of the things that archivists are really having to learn how to deal with and coming up with creative solutions, aside from just video. Um, so I think that's probably one of the most challenging. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. Do you want to ask it again?
I think I can help clarify. So, in terms of, is there like a specific skill that would help with the direction that either the type of materials that you're getting are going or the type of archiving that you're doing? So, maybe dealing with
Yeah.
certain types of materials or digital materials.
Yeah, well, definitely digital materials. Obviously, I mean the quantity of materials that's coming is staggering, and so now before when they had to pay for film, you'd be lucky to get like 3 or 4 rolls of film from a production. Now it's not unusual to get 600 photographs from one event, and if the photographer has not done selects, then you have to do the selects. And so you have to have a good eye for, picking the things that are wanted. But the other real challenge I think a lot of us are dealing with is the administrative, like now that everything is digital, like how do we deal with email and all of these administrative files because they disappear faster than you can sneeze. And so, I've just been trying to you know, being here since 2009 and seeing the change happen, I've been trying to adapt, but I feel like it's like a hurricane. You can't stop. And I think we have to collect things and postpone processing them more than before.
Thank you. We have a question asking about collective access, asking, is it similar to Omeka in terms of how it works?
I hate to admit it, but it's the only relational database that I know. I've seen a few of them in action, but I really can't answer with authority about that.
We have another question from the chat asking, maybe VR will be used in performing arts archives down the road. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, there is VR in BAM's history already. So one of the shows that we have like a children's programming section, and one of the productions we put on for stuff like about 5 years in a row was called Technopolis, and it included a VR workshop where it was mostly kids, but adults as well would be interacting in VR environments. And so obviously that stuff would be, um, could be archived. There is a lot of talk about experimental uh, different forms of presenting work now. So it's like, for a while, every show seemed to have projections in it. Now every show basically has projections, right, as a way of solving some set issues. But more and more technological stuff is being added. I'm trying to think. There was a show recently we did, which I mean, it really, okay, so it was like three large, enormous screens, left, center, and right. And there was like, it was sort of like Kanasquatsi, those films that Philip Glass did the music for. They're kind of like, lots of images very quickly. Um, well, it was like kind of like Kanasquatsi, but if you went up to the screen, like it would interact with you. There was like a camera that detected the presence of a person in front of the screen and changed the image where the person was. So that kind of stuff is happening. And in terms of the way that we archive stuff, like we record video of our presentations as documentation video. We're not doing Met in HD. We're not providing show theater for. We're not providing shows for video audiences, but we are documenting everything we can, and every show has presents a documentation challenge. Even a traditional theater show, depending on how important it is in the marketing world at BAM, or whether or not it's just something that's controversial. Different requirements are there for documentation. So, yeah.
Thank you. We have another question from the chat asking, how does your composing and engineering work from before this role influence your approach to the archives?
Oh, thanks for asking. Um, well, so before I worked at BAM, I was a recording engineer at a couple of recording studios. So, and it was a long time ago. I had to cut tape and work with multi-track machines. But now I have a recording studio in my basement. It's like a Pro Tools studio. And in fact, I have had sessions where I've been hired by BAM to record voiceovers for um, like promotional videos and stuff like that. Also, recently, I was informed that I was producing a video with board members, where board members were going to be interviewed, and I was able to hire a cameraman that I knew really well and trusted, and there was no more money except for the cameraman. So, who was the sound guy? Me, and also carrying the equipment and everything like that. So those little things have made me. I think they prepared me for how to work here because I know a little bit about photography. I know a little bit about video. I know a little bit about audio. I know I'm anal and I organize things relentlessly. All those things together, I think made this a perfect job for me. And I like being around the theater. So,
Thank you. We still have some time. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to unmute. Louie, I have one question about the new space. Is there one thing about the new space that you wish it had that it doesn't? Or is there something that you're kind of is like that wish that you wish you could add or change?
oh yes, this space has, like, when we weren't here, it was that golden city on the hill. It was like everything was perfect. And now that we're here, like the office is freezing. And the temperature is completely messed up all the time. I don't have an office with a door that I can close. It's like those kinds of things are really frustrating. But, you know, it's 5 blocks away from where I live. I can walk or bike to work. There's a lot of advantages. I don't have to make a special trip to the opera house. I can just walk over there. Those are really good things. But yes, of course, there are many. I wish they had asked me what I would like, but they didn't. Yeah.
Feel like that's a common problem. So
But how I can't I will say that the stacks are spectacular. The stacks work better than I thought they would. When I did the evaluation, I did not believe that everything we had would fit. And I've got empty compact shelves right now waiting for stuff to be put on them. So pretty amazing.
kind of going off that same idea, we have a question in the chat. What's your digitization setup like in the new space?
Okay. So we have a room that is what I call the workroom. For some reason, it was called the research room when it was designed. So it says research room on it, but really, that's where I have part-timers and interns working for the most part. And inside there is a room that was, remember, this space was planned over 10 years ago, and for some reason, they thought they were going to put Xerox machines in there. And but clearly it works for top lit photography. So we have a Nikon. Uh, Basically, it's like I think it's a D850. It's a really great digital camera that we tethered to a Mac and bought the Nikon software, and we can slam through printed material very, very quickly at good resolution. Um, and Actually, we were very lucky because we were able to get that camera as a result of somebody having money left over from a grant. So that was really cool. But there's room in there for two cameras. So we have a second camera that we were also able to get contributed, and that I discovered. I realized that I hate Nikon after having this camera because Nikon charges you for their tethering software, and Canon does not. So when the opportunity came up to get a second camera, I decided to go with the Canon just because the quality is basically the same, and then you're not paying for the software, which you have to have the serial number and all that stuff, and sometimes it doesn't work, and the software isn't that great, to be honest. And so I figured two different cameras, two different softwares, not bad idea. And then in terms of scanning, like we're scanning a tremendous amount of film right now of negative 35 millimeter and negatives and color slides. And so we're using an Epson 10,000 XL, which has the transparency adapter on the top, and we've been getting really good results out of it. But I don't know how many of you work with 35 millimeter film. It's very curly, and so I figured out a system where we could take glass and put it on top of the film to flatten it out and orient it properly, and then we get really good results. But I realized that in order to get really high resolution results, you really need to scan one frame at a time. So we're scanning at about 6,700 pixels per inch, which is more than these photographs deserve.
Kind of
Um,
going
yeah,
off the
go ahead.
space, we do have a question asking if you have a sprinkler system in the new space, and if so, what type?
There's definitely a sprinkler system. It's definitely it looks like a traditional sprinkler system with the water valves, the things that pop off when it gets engaged. I hope it never comes on. But we have done disaster scenarios and discussed it, and I don't know what you can do. We talked about putting plastic on top of things, and there's disadvantages to that as well. And so we're pretty much hoping for the best. Everything is in archival boxes, so hopefully the water will bounce off and we'll be able to rescue it in time. But no, we don't have that fancy gas system. No.
I think we have time for one more question from the chat. How do you help show the value of archives to leadership at performing arts organizations? Are there any examples you can share that were more effective than others at gaining support and funding?
I think that the way to show the value of the archive is to never say no to a request. We've become, from the time I started here till now, I would say that we have become invaluable because we always have the answer. Or, I mean, there are times when we don't have the answer, but we have the answer more often than not. And we are able to provide what is needed. Like my boss says, it, you know, it doesn't matter what we're doing, we're still getting paid a nickel an hour, whatever. It's like we we're a service organization inside of an organization that really probably couldn't care less about us until they need something. So whenever, as long as they need something, we're doing pretty well, I think. Like, and it's very often it's something dumb. It's like a going away present for a staff member, a brochure from a show for, somebody, a postcard, a gift for a board member, you know, that costume ended up being worn by our master of ceremonies at the last gala. So if it hadn't been here, it became valuable and it became iconic just by being used. So I think that's one thing. There was something else that occurred to me, but anyway, yeah. Um, if anybody's interested in more information about the archives or BAM, they're welcome to contact me, Lfleck, Lfleck at bam.org. It's very easy to find. If you're in the area and you want a tour, we can arrange that. I give a lot of tours. I love giving tours. And yeah, I guess that's about it, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, Louie, and thank you everyone for being here today. We hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.